Hello, Teachers of God family. It's Kimberly, and I am recording this video live from the Martha's Vineyard Hospital. And I'm going to be answering a question from one of the members of our Teachers of God community who is anonymous. And I came to the hospital because I want to use the elevator here as part of the answer to her question. So let me paraphrase her question. She says, I care for my elderly parents who are 95 years old, and I go almost every day to see them, and they're very negative, and they complain a lot. So I ask Jesus to come with me and to speak through me. I bless them with my love. I meditate and I pray every morning and evening. I do the workbook lessons. I read the course. I try to rest in God. I do pretty well, but sometimes I fall off. Is there something more I can do? So thank you so much for that question. And everyone who asks a question is always asking it on behalf of everyone, of the one mind that we share. So thank you so much for asking that question on behalf of everyone who is going to get healed through your question. So here is my answer to your question. First of all, we have to decide if we are going to know ourselves as cause or as effect. So what I mean by that is, as cause, we are creators. This is our creation. Everything we experience is coming from us. And as cause, we have the ability to change anything that we don't like. On the other hand, we could think that we're effect. And as effect, of course, we don't have the ability to change what happens because it's happening to us and it's out of our control. So when we feel like we're at the effect of things, that tends to make us feel scared and hopeless. So that's my first suggestion is to start to notice, are you coming from the knowing of yourself as cause, or are you forgetting that you're the creator and starting to feel like things are being done to you, or you are in the effect of what's happening? And then the next suggestion I want you to think about is, who is telling the story that your parents are negative and that they complain and that you're tired and that you don't know how to handle them because they're so negative? Who is telling that story? And I would say ego, because ego tells stories in which someone or something out there is affecting me. That's the nature of an ego story. It sets up a situation where I'm separate from whatever's going on, and therefore I'm the victim of whatever's going on. And that is the reason I came here to the hospital, is to use the elevator, because I want to use the way we step onto the elevator and that little gap that exists between the floor that you're on and the elevator that you're stepping into. I want us to think about that gap as being what the ego wants you to believe about life. So we'll go over to the elevator and we'll press the button. Here we go. Let's see, where's that button? Pressing the button. Okay. And then look at what happens. The elevator opens. And right here, see what you're seeing in your screen? That is the gap that I'm talking about. That's the gap between the floor that we're standing on and the elevator that we want to get into. And what ego does is it takes that little gap that would be so easy for us to step over, that gap from the floor into the elevator, so easy. But the ego takes any little situation that we're having and it begins to blow it up and make it bigger and seem more and more insurmountable and more overwhelming and more, difficult and upsetting. It gets the space so big that it starts to seem like you can't surmount the gap. It would be like standing at the elevator and having that little gap between the floor and the elevator get wider and wider and wider, and then me not being able to jump across the gap to get into the elevator. And that is what happens when we think that there is something outside of us that is upsetting us. The gap between me and the world starts to get bigger and bigger. And because it's getting so big and I can't jump into the elevator, which is, a metaphor for my God nature, for love, I become very frightened and I start telling even more scary stories. So that takes me to my next and final point. And that is the solution. The solution isn't to do more. You don't need to do more. What's being called for is for all of us to go into radical surrender and radical acceptance. And this is total surrender. And what that looks like is a complete relinquishment of the story, period. And for instance, we're not just trying to cut the top off of the dandelion so that we don't have to look at it anymore. What we want to do, radical and total surrender, is to take the dandelion out from the root. And the way we do that is to just commit completely to letting go of that story in whatever form it's showing up, in any possible way that it's showing up. Any thoughts, any sensations, any feelings, any stories, any perceptions, however that story is showing up, every time we notice it, we give it away. We just say, Jesus, take this. I don't want this anymore. You can even put it out to the universe, to Jesus and Holy Spirit, and say, I need your help with this. I'm going to be really focused on completely, radically surrendering this whole story. Please help me now. Or, as Jesus says, here I am, Lord. Just give it. Say, I am not going to compromise with this at all. And what we find when we radically surrender is we heal. That's what healing is. It's the radical surrender of what makes us sick, which is the big gap, the gap that would stop us from being able to get onto God's elevator. So that's the answer to your question. And there's just a little PS on the end as all of us go through these experiences, because we are all in the midst of these radical surrender experiences. There is a discomfort associated with anytime we're projecting our upset out into the world. There's a discomfort and a suffering that goes with, complaining and feeling like a victim. There's also a discomfort that goes with radically surrendering our thoughts. So it feels at first almost more difficult to surrender the thoughts than it did to have the suffering. That's why so many of us don't give up the the negative thoughts, because sometimes when we start trying to give up the negative thoughts, that also feels like suffering. And that is just the way the healing feels at first until it turns into joy. But at first, it is uncomfortable. And in A Course in Miracles, Jesus says, if you try to take some scissors away from a baby, the baby's going to scream its head off. It doesn't know that it could totally hurt itself with those scissors. It wants to play. And the same thing with us. Some of the things that we hold on to the most are hurting us the most. So practice radical surrender, and don't do it alone. Just call in Holy Spirit, call in Jesus, call in God, and just say, this is what I'm doing, and I need your help. Take these scissors out of my hand. All right? Peace, love, blessings. I love you. Thank you so much for your question. I love you, Teachers of God community. Mwah, mwah, mwah.